Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're enjoying Melbourne. I'm from northern New South Wales, and I have a picture of my farm there. I have a small 35-acre farm, which I grow horses and cattle. I call it my very successful money pit. And I am lucky that I don't rely on this farm for income, because many farmers who do rely on the farm for income are often very challenged about how their products are sold and bought. And this is not just in Australia, but it's global. And in this talk, I just want to introduce you to some of the work I've been doing in East Africa, and touching a bit on the work also in Southeast Asia, which I have the opportunity to engage with quite a lot because of being on the Australia-ASEAN Council, which is funded by Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And we focus on building relationships between Australia and ASEAN countries, and I particularly focus on the food supply chains. Now, hopefully this will move. Yes, great. This is in Zimbabwe, and whether your farm is in Zimbabwe or India or Australia, you are the starting point for producing food. You will have some inputs such as farm machinery, chemicals, fertilisers, but ultimately your role is to plant or grow some food that then transforms into a product that leaves the farm. Now, much of our focus in Australia has been on the commodity market, where you have no connection to the next person in the link except the buyer, who might be a buying warehouse. And it's the same in Zimbabwe and many countries. These farmers mainly grow maize. It's governed by a maize board, and they have no opportunity to value add or to have an engagement with the customers. But these products leave there, and they could go to a myriad of different countries. And this is in India, where they're making string and cotton which has come probably from Australia originally, and then will go on to be on ships around the world or move into China or wherever. Now, traditionally, we haven't worried or been able to be concerned about how these products are produced or where they go to. But the speakers that are going to follow me are going to discuss some of the amazing technology which has evolved particularly over the last 5 years, with the integration of different crowdsourcing hubs and data warehouses, so that now that farmer in Zimbabwe can sell his product. It can go through India and a few other countries, and they can actually know where it's ending up. Now, we are surrounded in Australia by megacities. We have the densest population growth in Southeast Asia. And these consumers are changing how they live, as we are. And they are no longer going to the local market. They're becoming purchasers in supermarkets, and their food is becoming much more snack and go. And these food trends are changing how they want their food to be sourced. They actually want to have a connection with the farmer, and they want to know what the ingredients are, how it's packaged, as we've seen many brilliant examples of down in the hall today. And they want to be able to feel healthy about their choices. It matters to them. I'm not saying every consumer wants that, but what is happening is that this consumption trend is steering how farmers' food is going through these supply chains, and it's requiring a completely different level of scrutiny of the journey of these products as they come off the farm. And part of the reasoning behind that is the greater emphasis on health and well-being. Food isn't purely something that we eat when we're hungry. It has become functional, it has become wholesome, and there is much more emphasis on understanding the role of protein. So traditionally in the developing countries, it's been about food security and just getting enough maize or enough basics. But the role that food is playing now is more about understanding the importance of having the proteins in the feeds. And technology is able to inform us all through apps and other processes, not just about where the food came, but what it's doing to our bodies, how much energy is going in, how much energy is going out. We've got smartwatches, etc. And these can all be linked straight back to the source. So that transformation process that is happening on the farm at the buy-sell level is actually becoming a different process. It's not just about selling a product, it's about selling a meaning, a connection. The challenge is that the value that can give is not always communicated to the farmer or back up the supply chain. And the sustainability of the supply chain is often not able to be maintained because although there's more sustainable practices that can be implemented at various levels, these aren't communicated effectively and the value of that process isn't available to the person who could implement them. So some of the work I do is about understanding where value can be added and where it's lost, but not just in terms of the economic buy and sell, it's in terms of the value that the end consumer would attribute to that and how to present it. And it can often be very simple things like the fact that a farmer might have a lot of waste and can transform that into a shelf-stable product like puree or jams, etc., which can then become sold throughout the year. That's a transformation that's we're working on in Africa, and we've also been looking at mechanisation and the connection of those tractors onto the web so that the consumer can actually know which farm produced that product. But it's the same challenge here in Australia with our huge cattle properties and other grain properties. There is an opportunity to understand more about the production of that commodity and to add different types of value than just selling it on the global market. So understanding what the value proposition is for each stakeholder in the supply chain is, and that includes understanding your weaknesses and your strengths and where your value adds, is my proposition and my talk about where sustainability is. It's actually lodged in the individual. And as John Kerry was saying this morning, we do have the ability to change and do things differently, but often it requires an intervention and a new form of leadership to understand what that change could be. So thank you very much. This is our one of the parents in the south in Zimbabwe. Their population's mean age is 20 years old, and these farmers will very likely be working with our farmers in the next generation, and we will all be far more sharing food and far more sharing technology because they're working off smartphones and so are we, and really the barriers between our countries and other countries around the world have disappeared due to the supply chain sustainability and traceability. Thank you.
Right. Who's got a $50 bill? Come on, there we go. There's a Victorian sheep farmer. Right, I've got a $50 bill. I'm not ashamed to say it. Who knows who's on the $50 bill? No one? Come on, we're here talking about ag tech and Australian disruption and innovation. Who knows who's on the $50 bill? Not a single hand. David Unaipon, 109 years ago, invented the mechanical shears. He's on our $50 bill. We carry him around in our pocket every day, especially if you're a Victorian sheep farmer, as a symbol of innovation at the crux of what we do. I find it so inspiring that we today are about to solve for the global food supply chain and the provenance of that. A problem that no one has been able to even tackle. How are we going to do it? Susie is becoming more and more interested in where her food comes from, what she feeds her children, what her family are eating. She's becoming more demanding about what the producers and the retailers and the processors tell her about what the ingredients are, where they came from, and what the provenance is. But provenance begins on farm. So what we need to understand about solving Susie's problem is, how do we ground provenance on farm and actually get it through to the consumer on the shelf, when incredible complexities in the supply chain and differing and conflicting demands and requirements through that supply chain are meaning that retailers don't necessarily want the consumer to have full traceability. Remember the issue of caged eggs? Retailers came out with free-range eggs, it's going to be great. People will pay a premium for them. We all went, what do you mean free-range eggs? All my eggs are free-range. I'm not going to pay a premium. You've got to make sure that all the chickens wander around scratching and they're healthy. I don't want them in boxes. Backfired on the retailers. The producers are desperately interested in continuity. They're looking at how can I generate more from my land and create a margin out of what I'm producing so that I can pass this on to the next generation, so that I can make it exciting enough so that my son will want to take on our land after Dad and I are gone. There's so much talk this week about agriculture being under productivity pressure, being under pressure to feed more people with more protein from less land and create less emissions. And that's great. But the adoption of technology in our industry is the absolute rock bottom of all of the different industry verticals. And why is that? John Deere is one of the most advanced technology companies in the world. We've got autonomous tractors and drones and satellites, and I'm pretty sure that my cow delivered mail on an electric conveyor belt this morning. The reality is that very little ag tech actually is anchored with the farmer at the center, understanding the way the primary producer operates their day, understanding that you have to deliver value, incremental margin to that farmer that is beyond the cost. They're the guinea pigs at the moment. You're asking them to spend a tiny razor-thin margin on adopting technology that they don't know whether it's going to be useful or not. Because tell me, is a drone right now in my field buzzing around actually deriving me a better price at market? So let's start with the incredibly basic elements. 90% of livestock farming globally has pencil and paper as its primary record-keeping tool. Despite people carrying a smartphone, a supercomputer, in their pocket. Why? Why hasn't greater digitization of these records already taken hold? The fact is that technology hasn't thought about it the same way that farmers do. Simple, drag and drop. Elements that are big buttons that work with cold fingers in the driving rain rather than spreadsheets and drop-down menus that are driven by technology and analysts and accountants. We have to know and live the challenge. And we have to drive value from that adoption. Too much of provenance, which is grounded in origin, is forced upon producers. You must do this recording of the NLIS, otherwise you'll get in trouble. You must have a biosecurity plan, otherwise we'll come and fine you. What about you can record all of your information, your calving, your lamb scanning, your pasture budgeting in the palm of your hand, and all of a sudden you'll see 20% productivity increases. You'll see more value. You'll be able to plan strategically for the future so that if droughts do happen, you can handle it. Admittedly, I'm building up to talk myself up. Clearly, AgriWebb is a farm management software, and we've been commercial for about 3 years, and we spent the first 2 years of our 5-year existence learning and living the problem on farm. I sound like a pom, but I'm from Western Victoria, which is really tough during the ashes, but it enabled me to really understand from an external perspective how farmers really live, how they understand and what they were doing. And as we've grown internationally, we see that this is a universal problem. We're able to take that information that farmers input on a daily basis to get value out of their own farm and start to build a bigger platform solution. And that then starts to be a discussion around the supply chain. That then means all of these wonderful benefits that we all know and realize and talk about from having a fully integrated supply chain. And at the moment, it's not just hypothesis. In the United Kingdom, which is probably the global leader in terms of integrated supply chains as a result of a disastrous effort in the mad cow crisis, we have an integrated supply chain with Tesco and Sainsbury's in combination with Dunbeer that process 43% of all the red meat in the UK, giving and paying farmers a premium to use this software on their farm to see protocols implemented that actually grow their animals more within spec. This then in turn gives much greater traceability about when on farm they're gathering this information from IoT or manual input. It flows into what are the projections of these animals? What are they ultimately going to be? What were they treated with? What was their medical exposure? What weights did they have? What did they eat? How long were they in what pastures? Which ultimately mean that you can start to project out which animals will and won't be in spec at the right time, which then enables a supply chain reciprocity. Tesco needs a huge spike in legs of lamb around Christmas time. Right, let's not send Fred in a car to drive around looking for lambs at the sale yard to fill up that supply chain need. Let's instead understand what they'll need and when they'll need it and where they can get it. And then let's start to use that information to drive back to reduce waste. So much of this conference is really discussing feeding this unfeedable number of people in a time that's totally unachievable. Well, the reality is we actually produce 40% more food than we deliver to plate right now. So let's start with the efficiencies of what we're producing right now. A supply chain stability, a predictability that is coming from and grounded in value for the producer. That is what will drive adoption. That is what will actually create provenance. So, to solve Susie's problem, we need to have a solution that's practical, that's feasible, and that's commercial. It starts on farm with the producer. David Dupont knew it. He could see the inefficiencies going on in the shearing sheds. And this Aboriginal pioneering investor broke out in 1910 to create a solution that the world adopted. Let's not make the same mistake and ignore where we've come from. Let's ground it in the origin. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name's Adrian Spencer and I'm the founder of Sampano. I think it'll help if we start with some background and definitions because I might sound like I'm speaking a different language. The purpose of Sampano is to really establish the local value chain for the nutraceutical industry. So in English, the nutraceutical industry, we kind of tend to call it the vitamin industry, and it includes products that vary from health supplements, vitamins, minerals, and cosmeceuticals such as skincare products. It's really quite a diverse and broad industry. And we were really quite surprised to discover that the raw inputs that go into the nutraceutical industry are generally imported. There's about $1 billion per year that come into Australia, and they're converted into products, and those products are either sold domestically or exported for sale. The question we asked ourselves is, why aren't those ingredients sourced locally? And is that possible? And for the past 18 months, we've been doing research to answer that question, and with the support of the Victorian State Government. And also we've got support from our partners, Swiss, part of the H&H group, and CSIRO. So we went out and started to ask the question, is there a potential for a new value chain to be established in Australia? Is it sustainable? Is it possible? And what would it look like, and what would that involve? So that was really our starting point. And we sort of said, first of all, is it worth it? What's the opportunity cost, and what's the value proposition here? So we started to look at just the nutraceutical industry in itself and discovered that it's an incredible, rapidly growing industry that has grown incredibly fast in the last few years, both domestically and in terms of exports. And that growth is projected to continue. So we said, great, we're onto something. There's something really interesting here. But at the same time, we had the marketing companies coming to us saying, why can't we access local ingredients? And we had growers coming to us saying, we would love to diversify. We would like to find new markets. We would like to try new crops. And we would like to see if we can access this industry. So we started to just break it down and say, who are the players? What would the market look like? And in a very simple sort of form, we came up with these sort of 4 main groups. It's obviously more complicated than that, but we figured out that if we were to create an end product, we needed a grower to produce the raw ingredient. We needed an extractive processor who would take the bioactive, the key ingredient that has the health benefit out of the raw ingredient. They would then provide that to a contract manufacturer who would turn that into a tablet or a capsule or a powder or a cream or some sort of skincare product. Then there would be a marketer that would promote that product. So what we discovered was the manufacturing and marketing, that's a very sort of established and even mature market. But what we discovered was that the growers and the extractive processors were saying to us, well, we didn't even know what you want or what we should grow to be part of this industry. And we don't really know how to tap into this value chain. And so what we discovered was if you were looking at fresh food or processed food, the markets, the value chains are very mature and very established. But as soon as you try to go into a different industry like this, there was very little ability to join the dots. So what we started to do was say, what's required to join the dots? And what would be needed to establish an industry in this place? And not just, let's rush into it and make it happen, but how would this industry ideally look if it was going to be strong and healthy and sustainable and effective? And when I say effective, we realise that it's got to be effective in different ways. So it's got to be good for everybody in the value chain. We didn't want to see another industry established where the grower's the one who's sort of, squeezed into oblivion and just sort of says, boy, I want to get out of this. But it has to be good for the processors and it has to be good for the marketers. And there's some incredibly good opportunities in this. So I just want to take a minute or two and unpack sort of what we've discovered and where we see this industry going. What we discovered with growers was there was different opportunities for them. Some of them came to us and said, tell us what we should be growing. We want to move away from traditional crops and we want to go into new products. And we want to start small scale and we want to scale up. And they said to us, what do we grow? What goes into a nutraceutical product? So we started to look at the lists and there were hundreds of ingredients that were being imported and there were even more opportunities available locally. And they vary a lot, everything from grapeseed extract to curcumin, which comes from turmeric, lycopene from tomatoes. And so we just started to list all of these different things. And what we found Australia's strength is botanicals. So the fruit, the vegetables, the seeds. There's a whole raft, a whole range of products that were of interest. And then there was the unusual stuff. We started to find on the list things like noxious weeds, and the farmers were saying, we've been trying to kill these for years, you want us to grow these now? So what we discovered was it was quite diverse what could be grown, which is good because it suits different grower regions, it suits different grower skills and capabilities. But beyond growing for purpose for nutraceuticals, we also discovered there was a really big opportunity to take waste streams and to take byproducts and actually turn those into high value products. At the moment, we found a lot of the waste products were being dumped or going to animal feed or going to fertiliser. And not to discount those as viable uses of those products, but what we were looking at was saying, could we make money out of those, and could they go to high value end products? An example is grapeseed extract. Grapeseed extract is used in skincare, it's used in multivitamins, it's got lots of nutraceutical benefits and health benefits for the body. And so when we looked around, boy, we discovered no end of grapeseed extract that was grapeseed that was available. So with Australia's incredible wine growing capabilities, we quickly discovered that while the grapes were being crushed and the juice was being used, the grape mark, the skin, the flesh, the seeds, were generally being sort of thrown out, and they tend to go off and stink, so they go up the back of the paddock. But what we realised was if we could extract the grapeseed extract, get the polyphenols out of that, use the skin, some of those ingredients and extracts were actually of higher value than the juice that was going into wine. And we've discovered this in a number of areas. So we started to say, wow, you know, out of these waste streams, we can start to convert these into really useful products. So we discovered that there was growers who could grow for purpose, and there was growers where we could take waste. We even discovered in Gippsland where growers were growing broccolini, and they would have the boxes that they'd have to fit them in for coals. They'd sort of chop off the ends. You know, we thought, great, that's a brassica. We can take that, we can powder that, we can turn that into different prebiotic and health properties as well. So we started to discover that, yeah, the opportunity is quite good for the growers. The next step was how do we get the good stuff out of the ingredients? And we found there was a bit of a gap in the extractive processing market. So we're working on that at the moment. And we're encouraging people who have those extracting capabilities. It's not new technology, it's just that not a lot of it exists here in Australia. And in fact, we've got one of them on our stand out there over the next few days, and Kerry's from Botanical Innovations, and she can talk about some of the really innovative and processing things she can do with different ingredients and raw ingredients. We then found that the contract manufacturers really work for the marketers to obtain and combine the ingredients in the right format and the way that the marketers want. And generally that's around quality, it's around regulation, and it's also around marketing. So what we found, the marketers are coming to us saying, we really want to tap into the clean, green Australia brand. You know, it resonates here and it resonates overseas. And you know, we don't just want the good quality ingredients, we want to tell the story of those good quality ingredients, which really feeds into the whole provenance and traceability piece, which is starting to get so much prominence at the moment. So that's really, you know, what we've discovered and where we've come from. But where we're headed at the moment is we've just released a white paper for the industry to show people how to be involved and how to participate in it, and to really break it down and say, if you're interested, let's give you the knowledge, let's give you the tools, let's give you the levers so you can decide if it's right for you to participate in the industry. It's only emerging just now, but it's going to evolve really rapidly. And we're overwhelmed by the number of people that are coming to us saying, we really want to access these Australian ingredients and we really want to use them in our products. So I'd encourage you to open your eyes and ears to hear more about what's going on in this space and to see if it's relevant to you or relevant to the people that you know. We've got a booth here for 3 days and we would just love to connect with people. We're really trying to build an integrated, open marketplace so that people can access the right people, and that's our job as facilitators, to be enablers to make that happen. So please come and see us if you're interested, have a chat, and we'd love to share more information with you. Thanks very much.
Wait for a slide. So the most important challenge in the world today, hang on. There we go. The most important challenge in the world today, and number one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, is eliminating poverty. Of those in poverty, the vast majority are in farming, fishing, or part of their often remote rural communities. Good organisations worldwide are investing trillions to address this issue, but they struggle to connect with the last mile users. And that's what AgUnity does. We connect the organisations that are trying to help address poverty and other UN Sustainable Development Goals with the last mile. Because you cannot solve poverty without addressing financial inclusion and without resolving inefficiencies in rural supply chains. And you cannot address either of those issues at any sort of scale without technology that's relevant and useful. A bit over a decade ago, the iPhone and other smartphones transform life for people like us. They give us convenience and entertainment and all the things we use in the palm of our hand. They didn't help the poor. A smartphone could cost a year's income, and as much as a low-income farmer might enjoy Facebook or YouTunes or music as much as we do, those things don't help them work, earn more, or feed their children. And the applications that are available to them are really not relevant to what they do in their daily lives. So AgUnity is addressing helping transform the lives of these people with a smartphone and blockchain solution that is relevant to them because it's been designed to specifically solve their real challenges. Like a user experience that's designed for people that have never had a phone before or any other technology and may have very low literacy levels. We address the connectivity in remote regions so it works when there's no signal. We resolve security of transactions by recording everything in blockchain so they don't have to trust us or government or any other organisation. And we've got a really cost-effective way of deploying it out and supporting it in remote regions. We position ourselves as sort of a super app down the lower end of the market, focused on people that have probably never had phones before, and we focus on ways to help them earn more and operate better in their daily lives. And like a super app, like most super apps, we encourage others to build their own features and applications and migrate them onto our platform. AgUnity works across the whole supply chain, right from the producers through the cooperatives, buyers, and into the end consumers. And we use IoT devices and blockchain technology to track the produce all the way through the supply chain. And we're building communities around this. So what's really been interesting is when we set up a network with the farmers join it. Once the farmers are all working well, the shopkeeper wants it because the farmers want to buy things directly with the shopkeeper. Then the truck driver wants it, and then the doctor wants it, and ultimately the whole community starts using the same application, is able to interact with each other. So we're creating these communities, and our application is a platform. So we encourage others to build onto the AgUnity platform and build their own communities to solve unique challenges. Because every market, every language, every commodity has different requirements. And we're designed to be a framework to allow other people to do that. So we have multiple projects are running right around the world at the moment, and we're seeing really fantastic results from these. Learning how to solve this was not easy. We started in Kenya in 2016. We've worked on projects in Asia and the Pacific. And we've learnt this by living and working with the farmers in these remote regions. And we discovered that in a number of our projects, we increased the farmer income by 3 times in a single season, essentially by removing inefficiency and waste from their supply chains. We refined our solutions by working with best practice cooperatives and NGOs and buyers of produce to give them what they really require. For our users, we kind of fill the gap between general purpose applications that just don't do what they need, and applications that are too specific and complicated for them to use. But our real customers are not the farmers. Our real customers are the organisations that need to connect with these last mile users. Just as service providers, like people that need to sell solar lights into remote regions. Financial institutions, because we've discovered that we can slash the cost of banks and insurance company providing financial services into these remote regions. Most particularly the commodity buyers that need to trace the origin of their produce. There's no way to tell why coffee is spoiling at the source unless you're capturing data at the source. And as AgriWebb was saying before, the only way you can do that was having technology in the hands of the farmers. It does not work by paper. And then finally, where we started was with the development programs and NGOs who need a better way to trace the impact of all the money they're investing to try to help these people. AgUnity also creates a unique ability for farmers to be able to get together and understand the transactions between them so they can collectively share, rent or buy equipment. And we've had that in our first project in Kenya. One individual farmer alone could never afford a tractor, but 50 or 100 of them absolutely can, and they can make much better use of that equipment. And this is another area that drives substantial productivity increases. This project in Ethiopia is particularly interesting. We're working on this with World Food Programme. We're with a large group of coffee farmers. We're tracing the coffee all the way into coffee shops in Germany and Ireland. And by next year, we'll have the ability that when you receive your coffee in the coffee shop, you can scan the QR code and so you can see the exact farmer that grew your coffee. So real single origin. And it won't be too long after that that you, in real time, can tip that farmer, they can receive the money and they can say thank you for you, which makes having your morning coffee a whole lot nicer that you've connected with a person and known that they've been paid fairly for their work. This is my favourite project. It's in the island of Bougainville in Papua New Guinea. It's particularly interesting because Bougainville will hopefully be an independent country in a year or two. We're working with a lovely group of cacao farmers there, run by Ursula Rakova, who's considered a national treasure and was a speaker at COP21, and vastly improving the productivity around cacao. What we've mainly solved here is waste, because cacao farmers would harvest cacao, they couldn't ferment it and dry it themselves, they'd leave it in bags hoping someone would turn up to buy it, and half the time no one turned up, or if they turned up, they've got no money. So most of the cacao in Bougainville was rotting. We've now got a supply chain where people can identify when there's something available, someone will always come up and pick it. They don't need cash on the spot because we've got a secure record-keeping system. And that's really all AgUnity is. It's something that goes over the head of most of the audience here because we've become accustomed to the fact that, you know, when I'm growing up, we truck our wheat truck into SACBH, deliver the wheat, and we don't have to worry about the fact that we're not going to get paid. That's the main problem in the developing world, trust and cooperation, and it's because they have no means of securely recording transactions. On top of the work we do in developing markets, we've also adapted and used our technology for a number of solutions here in Australia. We have a wool growers solution in Victoria and New South Wales. We're working on fish and red meat traceability projects, so very similar to what Jason was saying before. And you're about to hear from Darryl that we are the technology company behind a fresh produce tracking project for a $50 billion retail chain. And so we are transforming the lives of large groups of people, and I personally feel that's a really great thing to be part of. So thank you very much.
Hi everyone, lucky last. All right, who in the audience went to the supermarket, bought a punnet of berries or an avocado, you get it home and it just turns to crap? Just about everyone. So, gone too far. So over the next few days, we're going to hear a lot about food waste. You know, it's a $1 trillion problem, 20 billion in Australia. What I want to talk about is actually the waste that occurs from the producer through to you when you buy those berries. So what you don't know is somewhere along that chain, that pallet of berries is out in the hot sun, it's wiped out the shelf life, leaving you unhappy. So that food waste represents a very large problem to growers. Up to 5% of their produce is outright rejected by the retailers when they purchase it, but it's a far bigger loss to the whole industry. The retailers actually incur the biggest loss, because what do you do when you get a bad bunch of berries? Next week, you don't buy berries again, or all the associated items that go with that meal. So it's quite a big revenue hit to those guys. So our solution, like all the best solutions, focuses on the customer. In the retail chain, that's usually the purchase buying the produce for their own or their family's consumption. So we talk to the retailers and to understand their problem. So they're looking for a solution. They don't want multiple solutions. There was something that can work across all of their suppliers. They don't want to be adding additional costs. So we've set about to create an open industry-wide standard. This is our co-founder, Chris McLaughlin. He is Young Farmer of the Year for 2018, Organic Farmer of the Year. So he is producing the majority of organic mushrooms that go out to the retailers. So Chris was having a problem because when he went and checked the quality of his stock on the retail shelf, found it was, deteriorated or wasn't the best quality. And if you bought his product, you blame him, and the next time you go in there, you don't buy his mushrooms. So he was getting quite frustrated. He puts a hell of a lot of work, as do most of our producers in the country, to produce quality produce, yet when it leaves his farm gate, he doesn't have any visibility of what happens in that supply chain until he's quality checking it in the retailer. So he went to the retailers and his carriers to understand that problem, to try and improve it, but everyone's got their whole silo of data and they weren't really sharing. So with Chris, we formed a company called Escavox to solve that, to go about solving his problem, as well as a lot of other producers' problems. So our solution, we track the temperature, time, and location using our little trackers that are installed into a carton of produce that's in a pallet, and we track that right through the whole supply chain until that carton goes onto the retail shelf and the sensor's removed, and the retailer actually sends that device back to us, and we then send it out to producers again. So we're aiming to create better visibility in the chain, identify and predict any issues, loss and rejections aimed to be reduced, creating better insight in the performance of all the supply chain partners and participants so they could manage that and change any issues along the way. So as I said, it works by we put that tracker in the carton. We provide alerts and stuff that are in real time that we can provide to our clients and customers. But the biggest thing that Chris identified is the lack of trust in the system. So David mentioned trust and third world or developing world farmers. I think there's a trust issue in our supply chains with our retailers and the carriers and the producers. They were unwilling to share data. So what we've gone about is our industry solution is all about data ownership. So our little tracker goes through a multiple of owners in the supply chain, and we assign the data to that owner at that time. So then everyone owns their own data, and we went and looked at it at a different perspective to go, if you owned your data, what if you shared it and everyone could see from start to finish to identify any issues to improve quality of produce where everyone's a winner. So what we're aiming to do is basically create a voice of the product. So we're aiming to put a score on how that produce tracks through the supply chain, so we can ensure that it's kept in optimum temperature as it goes along the chain. Sorry, I'm messing up the slides a little bit there. So in this example where we're tracking avocados from a couple of the large producers in the country, they've got multiple harvest sites around the country. So we're matching their dwell time and temperature through the chain, and they're actually comparing that into sort of their retail sales. So a couple of them have acknowledged a certain dwell time and in a ripening and through their supply chain have actually increased sales. So we believe from this data they'll be able to analyse and make improvements in the way they're shipping their product out. What we're aiming to improve that data is to actually create some shelf life algorithms per produce item. So currently we're working with berries and avocados, and our next trial is actually going into red meat. So we're partnering with MLA Donor Company, we're doing a pilot. So MLA have put an extensive amount of money in with University of Tasmania to develop a meat shelf life algorithm for Australian red meat. So basically I've calculated a process of when they vacuum pack that meat. It has 160 days shelf life at minus 0.5 degrees. And then through our trackers, we'll be able to provide real-time data to actually give live shelf life predictions of that produce as it goes through the supply chain. So at the moment we have a device as a service, so we rely on the retailers to return our devices, so we send them back out to the producers. Everyone's aware of the strawberry needle crisis and also the large expanding food fraud problem. The industry, I believe, wants to go to carton level tracking. At the moment we're kind of tracking pellets of produce, so we want to be able to get it down to a carton level so we can add provenance and then aim to, sorry, this slide deck's really going a long way. So we're on a mission to move towards that supply, carton level tracking. So how we're going to do this is we're partnering with an Israeli company who's just developed a really cool bit of tech. It's a printable Bluetooth label. So basically an energy harvest on any mobile phone, Wi-Fi or any Bluetooth it harvests that energy in what's called wave computing, and then it'll send out a packet and broadcast a BLE packet. At the moment they're generating and pushing that about 2 meters. So we believe that's going to evolve over the next 12 to 18 months to about 10 meters. So what that does is gives a unique ID, and it's a big improvement going on from RFID. And we're putting a fair bit of effort into this to actually add a story and provenance and traceability of that carton through the supply chain. So currently there's 1 billion chilled cartons of produce or food transported in Australia. So it's quite a big market, and we think it's got a lot of value to be able to address issues that are currently occurred with the strawberry needle crisis. So we've got a group of co-founders. We've only been around for 12 months. We've been going pretty quick. We've got a large pilot with a large Australian retailer. We raised the Series A round, and we're just moving into doing some international pilots for meat and produce. And if there's any producers in the room that are interested in doing any export trials, come and have a chat to us. All right, thank you.